It doesn't matter how large or small your model locomotive is. If it's travelling along the track and pausing very slightly each time the wheels revolve, somebody sage is going to turn up at the edge of the baseboard, tap their pipe on it and go, "I think you'll find the quartering is out." At that point they'll wander off, leaving you wondering what on earth they are talking about. So let's see if we can explain this. What is quartering? I've got a chassis here that allows me to show the idea rather more clearly than a finished loco. Any locomotive with rods connecting the wheels, or connecting rods as we like to call them, or con rods as we tend to shorten them to, will have them set this way. So you've got the wheels, if you look at one side here, the rods are at the top of the wheel, and if I turn the chassis over you can see that they are on the side. Now that is literally a quarter of a wheel turn different, hence the phrase quartering. Haha, that was easy, wasn't it? So as long as the wheels and where the rods are set this way, then in theory the locomotive should run. Except it's not that simple. Okay, now I am going to make this slightly simpler to make it understandable. There are an awful lot more things. Somebody is probably sitting here shouting about 3-cylinder locos and that sort of thing. But let's keep it simple. We're looking at a 4-wheel locomotive, and we are assuming two cylinders. Okay. To be honest, these are model railway locomotives. Unless it's live steam, actually a lot of this thing doesn't really matter. Okay, here we are. These wheels, as I've said, you can see there's a fair bit of slop in this chassis, but it runs absolutely fine. These wheels are set so that they are a quarter of a turn different. But actually, when somebody grandly says, "Oh, I think the quartering is out," what they actually mean is that, for example, that wheel and that wheel are not set exactly the same on the axle, and this causes a problem because it's possible for the wheels to be slightly out and messes up the rods. How does it mess up the rods? Well, the important thing is that the centers of the rods and the centers of the wheels are the same distance apart. If those are the same distance apart, then all should be well with your model. And when quartering goes out, what it means is that one of these wheels has moved slightly, and then effectively the centers are no longer in the same place, because this wheel is slightly further round, therefore the holes need to be further apart, and when they're the right distance on this side, then the whole thing gets lumpy. What happens is the wheels, as they try and turn, bind slightly, usually on the rods, and sometimes you can just power it through, turn the controller up a bit further, and it'll get past the tight spot. But generally it's going to involve lumpy running, and that's what happens when somebody says, "Oh, the quartering's gone out," because one of the wheels has moved very slightly, messed up the geometry of the whole chassis, and bad things happen. Now, this is a chassis I've built, and the wheels are pressed straight onto the axles. So I've got round axles, wheels are pressed hard onto them, and I've had to set the quartering by hand. And the way I do that is by tweaking the wheels with my fingers, just a quick twist, and that usually is enough to adjust the wheels so that the quartering is correct. That's great, but that's not how ready to run locomotives work. If I look at the wheels and axles from a dead Hornby Percy, you can see that the ends of the axles have got splines on them. Now these little ridges grip the center of the wheel and stop it turning. At the factory there's a jig, they put the axles in, they put the wheels on, and they're all set quartering, and they just push hard and onto the axle they go. Simple. And the good thing about it is the splines should stop the wheel moving on the axle, because that's the crucial thing. You don't want the wheel moving on the axle. You can even see there's an extra set of splines on the driven axle here for the gear wheel, because again you don't want the gear wheel moving on the axle. And generally the great joy of kit building locomotives is that some of the wheel sets require wheels tightly gripping a round axle, and sometimes that just doesn't work, and that's where your quartering goes out. The problem with ready to run locos is that if the quartering goes out, if a wheel moves on the axle, which is a very, very rare occurrence, far rarer than most people would let you believe. There is a problem. You can't easily just tweak the wheel back because you've got the splines, and the splines will cut into the plastic centre of the wheel and they won't grip as well, and therefore badness will ensue. Truth is, if you get a ready to run loco out of the box and it doesn't run and it's lumpy and you think the quartering is out, the solution is send it back because it's faulty. Manufacturers have got all the jigs and everything to do this properly, and they really don't have a problem. So it's probably come out of the factory faulty, and there's very little you can certainly as a beginner, that you can do about it. If you actually want to take the wheel off the axle, the correct way of doing it is with what we call a wheel puller. Now this is a clever device that grips hold of the back of the wheel, and this is quite good. The Percy wheels are quite good because they've got a nice metal back, so they're nice and strong. If you've got plastic spokes, then this technique can be a bit trickier, and sometimes it's worth putting a washer or something behind there. You then wind in the pusher bit until you push it goes into the center of the axle, and you just keep winding it, keep winding it, keep winding it, and all the pressure is on the end of the axle, and that will move it enough. And that's not quite done enough there, so we'll have another go. Don't try brute force and pig ignorance on these things. You can actually sometimes bodge this with a vice held behind the wheel and putting a pin down the center. There we are, just push that out. There's the axle completely free of the wheel now, and you can see the splines that were there, and I've done that, and there's been no pressure on the no pressure that's going to cause a problem on the wheel itself. That would then allow you to push put the wheels back at the correct 90 degrees to each other, push them back on, and all will be fine. You know what? If you don't have to do it, don't do it. The other thing that people will do, and if I use my test chassis again, is that they will try and open up the holes in the rods, so it's a little bit more slop. As you can see, this is quite a sloppy chassis, but because it's 16mm, it's going to work fine. They will open out the holes in the rods, so the chassis is a bit sloppier, and they'll go, oh well, they'll wear in like that. And it's true, they might do, but the truth is, it's still a bit of a bodge. So in an ideal world, you want the wheels at 90 degrees to each other, the rods to have nice small holes, only very slightly larger than the crank pin. Put that on and it'll all work fine. How does this help you with a ready to run loco? Well, the truth is, if a loco comes out of the box and it's lumpy and you think the quartering is out, then basically send it back because it's faulty. These things are manufactured and it can happen. Generally though, if I'm honest, they will run sweet as a nut. This Hornby Peckett, for example, I can't build a chassis that works as well as this, and I've built loads and loads of them. The manufacturers have all the tools, the jigs and everything, and generally they get it pretty much bang on all the time across thousands and thousands of locos. This is one of the reasons why, if you can, go to a local model shop who will let you test run a locomotive first, so that you can pick, ideally test run 2 or 3, so you can pick the best runner of the lot. And other than that, generally you'll find that you won't have a problem. But at least when the expert taps his pipe next time and says, oh, I think the quartering is out, hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. Happy modelling and happy running.